Yet it's weird!
On my face.
I've been waiting for a trans-team. What would you like from here? Finally, you'll be able to transition if you'd like. We'll go our pace in compute. I'm giving you power to transition. Looks like you know what you want. Oh no!
Shall I give you a pronoun from the pronoun dice? Or would you prefer your name? transition my way, bitch, and you can do a thing about it. Trying to drown my head in water, so much water. I just drink water. Facebook's just like water. Facebook's just like Chroma. Hospital messages like, oh, black forward this. No, look at that bad forward this. We are taking you to the bottle swap shop. Traveling with us is our safe public transport. I don't feel by myself. I wish I could change my way. I'ma give my body's mine, and mine forever. I'ma give my body's mine, and mine forever. Give my body's mine, and mine forever. I'ma give my body's mine, mine forever.
Danielle,
Hi.
it's really good to see you, and I hope that you're doing well.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. And I am doing well, so that's really great.
Today we're talking a little bit about the broader meshing of games and art and the spaces that are being created right now. What are we playing here? Like, what is this?
So this is Dead End Road. I would say it would come from the horror PS1 community, which is a community that make PS1 type horror games. And essentially the game is you drive on the road and are haunted. That's all the game is.
PS1 actually, like me being like PlayStation 1 from like the
Yeah.
late 90s, right? Early 90s.
So like the early 90s, like very low poly, low fidelity graphics. You just have to make more up in your mind than actually what you're seeing. I don't know, I really like, this is actually the first PS1 horror game, modern PS1 horror game that I actually played.
Uh-huh.
The aesthetic has just hooked me. It's just been something that I've used in my work. It's been something that I've really been inspired by. These older games kind of have this texture to them, this like grit. It almost feels like you can feel the effort that went into like making it work on a system that doesn't quite render 3D well. And so when that's replicated for me, it feels really nostalgic and really nice. And at the same time, for me, they can really like amp up particular moods.
It's funny too, right? Because like it's not just that she doesn't look right, it's also because like her eyes don't have pupils and it's hard to tell because of the resolution.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and like the thing with this aesthetic is like you've got to make up your mind what you're actually seeing. Like you're filling in the gaps more than actually what the game's telling you, because the game is like, I can't be bothered to actually show you everything. Oh god.
I'm low-key concerned right now.
And I just love this aesthetic so much. Like, for me, this is like a perfect point to talk about like user input and how you can make them feel like invested, even if what you say doesn't have any effect. So like what I'm going to request from Dark Powers is trans power, and that's accepted. And for me, that's something that I really want to take into my work.
That's often used in your work, and that user input is like, tell me more about why you like that.
When I played a lot of games in the past, I often felt like I was playing a role and position that had nothing to do with me, and I couldn't really be involved in. But when I write trans power at the beginning, it doesn't actually do anything. I don't think it affects the game. Maybe I have to type the same thing at the end, but just because it let me do that, I feel like that's the thing I'm working towards.
It's a simple mechanic to add some kind of investment for the player that like...
Right, exactly. You put in your own game mechanic there just for a second, you know? Okay. Why I moved from kind of performance to video games is because so during the performance I was kind of making similar work, and I made this piece called Digging for Black Trans Life, which is all about digging for history of black trans people and not finding any, and wishing that I could speak to black trans ancestors who are just black trans people of the past. Yeah, and so the whole thing is, I mean, you know my aesthetic, it's very clear what it's about. But the problem I was finding is that people were finding it very easy to consume it. And because I was performing, it was kind of something they could step into, not think about themselves at all, and see as a kind of wacky, fun thing to look at. And that started to really grate on me. And within this work, I actually had false choices within the film. So there were these choices that would come up, and they'd be predetermined. Essentially, it's a video. And after that show, I decided that I wasn't going to be like the center of attention anymore. I wasn't going to be the trans person you can come and visit and look at. And instead, everyone that's coming to see the show is actually the one that's performing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's how I kind of got into making video games, was that I decided that the performance would only happen by the participants coming in.
You decentered yourself and replaced the player ego as the central figure.
Yeah, I think what I did is like I was like, what's the best way to center black trans people and decenter this gaze that like people like to look at me because they see me as an other, and that's why they're coming to see this work. And so yeah, I'm gonna buy that. So for me, the best way to do that was to make everything that someone sees responsible to that single person. Oh, this is...
Oh!
It's one of those games, eh? New game.
New game time.
Okay, so new game. So the story of this game is that it's actually one of the first Game Boy Advance games I had, and it's the one I remember the most. Like I honestly don't remember much of what I played on Game Boy Advance apart from Doom and this game. And it's a very trashy GTA clone. And in fact, I can't even believe they put this video on a Game Boy Advance. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, everything about this is ridiculous. Like, and the game, when I replayed it recently, it's terrible. Like, it's not great. It's not great, but my only memories are it was amazing, and I lived in it and I breathed in it. It was the first game that I would do stuff like obey by the traffic lights.
Yeah.
And walk the streets with the other pedestrians and just pretend I'm having a nice day, and then occasionally crash a bus and like, oh, I just have to defend myself. And so for me, this game has that kind of history, but at the same time, just look at the aesthetic.
It's a mess.
It's a mess, and I'd love it. For me, I think about like alternative histories like a lot. Like I think about them all the time. And I think, so the first kind of alternative history I think about is what happens if we didn't lose any black trans history at all, and if all the black trans history in the world was still here and hadn't been erased and buried. And so for me, like I see technology as a way to kind of try and think about that. When I think about video games, like the first thing I try to do, I try and like replicate black trans people in them. And usually in video games, the team doesn't reflect that at all. So you usually can't get something that actually reflects you wholly.
What do you mean by that?
The teams are usually made up of a very particular demographic, and because of that, you don't get the range that the game would have if the demographics were different. So like, how would this game differ if the team was black and trans? And how would their representation of black people, how would the representation of the places black people are living, how the representation of all of those things be if the actual team was black? And how would the game mechanics differ? Like, what mechanics would actually be in a game that was designed by a black person, designed by an entire black team? What would be the point of video games if the industry was actually designed by black people itself? Like, would the point be less of entertainment? Would it be more of art? Would they be seen differently? Or would they be seen as more of a nuisance? All of this kind of stuff. And so for me, like, video games take on this strange kind of phenomenon, is that they're usually just seen as like fun entertainment for people with money to spend time on. This is the weird thing, like video games aren't really seen as like worth anything apart from entertainment. It's not the same thing as like a movie. You don't really get a video game that's cerebral in the sense that someone will talk about it in an analysis and say like, this game will change your life, and like is a really good look into the studies of like how humans are destroying the world. Usually it's like you're the person destroying the world and it's fun, and then you turn it off the game and the game's done. That's there because like you had a certain subset of like white men making these games. They weren't really using games to make issues, they were using games for fun. They're using games to make entertainment for the other buddies who own £3,000 computers. And then putting them in the universities and using the privilege of the university system to actually like test the first MMORPG.
The first deathmatch was played on university computers, right?
Right.
Like
back in the days, like they didn't have like game engines that were easy to use like Unity. So like, you know, they're often building a whole new kind of engine just for one game. For example, we'll use Payback as an example. This terrible game engine What it can do is simulate a city, kind of, barely. Have cars in it, have you run around, phone calls, sounds, all this stuff. But the only thing this engine does is support this game in which like it has no story, it doesn't say anything, it doesn't do anything, it's lost to time. That's it. You know, it's a bit of entertainment and a bit of fun. It's a material. They made an entire material that could have been used to say something. You know, that could have been used to actually replicate something. Or at least like imbue this material with like a soul. And I feel like often these games, these things don't really have a soul. They have an aim, which is to make money, and which is to make something entertaining enough or like violent enough so that people will buy it. But I don't think we often get games, and we're getting more now with like the indie scene, but I don't think we often get games that stray very far away from that and say like, no, this game, it's not for everyone. It's only for a specific group of people. Anyone else that will play it will feel uncomfortable because this game isn't trying to be what the gaming industry calls games, and is instead trying to use the material of a game engine, the material of choices, the material of interactive media as a way to make something more clear and make something more easily understood.
Yeah. Like this one, for example, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I used to play this game, all the time. On a smaller screen, mind you. Okay, we're switching games, though, because this game is making me sick.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. I think it runs better like this, actually. That's very funny. Yeah, it does.
Well, okay, so what's coming up? What have you got next?
Oh, so next is ASCII-Sec.
Let's play this.
Okay, so first name, let's say, okay, I guess I'll enter my actual digital name. Oh, I can't. Oh. Okay, virtual trans will do.
Yeah,
last
there you
name.
go.
Oh,
yeah.
Perfect.
And
so this is a perfect place to begin.
we're already here. Mm-hmm.
Okay, hi everyone. This is ASCII-Sec. So this is a simulation of an entire galaxy in which you can go around and kind of trade, essentially. That's all you do. And this screen is the perfect screen to kind of begin on because this kind of gives you an idea of who's made this game. And it gives you an idea of who this game is for instantly. And so something that games don't usually do, they give you the choice to write your name, they give you the choice to write your first name and last name as seen here, but when it comes to your gender, they've made the decisions for you already. You know, there's a decision that's being made there that's saying that, okay, like this is the kind of thing we're adhering to. We have the entirety of space to think about, but gender must only be male and female.
Only in their gender binary, yeah.
And for me, this is kind of like, and seeing this, none of us are surprised, you know? And this is kind of what I think is imbued within the industry, is that there's so many choices that are made for you, made for the people that they think they're making the games from. Like they have games for like girls, they have games for like boys, they have games for like older men, they have games for like older women, like all of this kind of stuff. And they have big teams that kind of like push them towards that. And so there's been like 1,000 decisions made towards why Animal Crossing is great for girls, you know? But at the same time, it's like pushing everything towards a very particular segmented, gender-based, role-based kind of industry, in which most of the industry is run and held by men. And so I often find games super frustrating because the things that you get to do and the things that you want to do, they all feel like they have this particular gaze that you just can't escape from regardless of which game you jump to.
The whole galaxy ahead of us, and we are immediately constrained in a system that theoretically could simulate anything we want. And so even within that, even with everything that we've said in this idea of computers transcending the physical realm and the borders and stuff like that, you land here and our starting point for this simulation is still immediately shackled.
For me, I find it weird. I find it's like a very particular kind of experience. They kind of want you to project yourself onto the world, but at the same time, they make sure that there's limits there. But they say those limits aren't political. They're not a comment. They're not trying to make you do anything. And this phrase that has stuck with me my entire life, which is we don't want politics in our games. When I think like there's just so much. I'm so surprised when I hear that, because I'm always like, there's so many politics in our games. There's a reason why military shooters are super popular, and the military is also super popular with people who like military shooters. Like there's a reason they use like Doom as a training simulation when it was very popular. Like there's a reason all of these things are political, but at the same time, like games can kind of lavish in this idea that like they're just entertainment, they're not political at all, they're not really saying anything or doing anything, when I think they are, and I think they can do way more if we were just allowed to.
What do you think is needed to support this? Because it's clearly urgently needed, right?
The thing is, it's like, what I'm asking for is like actually very straightforward and very simple. You know, it's like a black trans game studio, you know, just like you have all the other kinds of game studios out there, like a black trans game studio is all I'm asking for. But actually just something that simple is super difficult to do, you know, and I don't think it's impossible at all, but that's the kind of point we're at. It's like even wanting a space that's for black trans people to sit in is very hard to find. They're very hard to keep, because no one has made the investment into our lives and into those spaces. And I think that's what we're missing out on, is that people are not invested in hearing like the things we got to say, the media we've got to create. It's not like a booming business. Like trans people aren't being hired because people think they're good storytellers, even if they are. They're being hired because they needed a trans actor, you know. And I feel like that the problem is, it's like we're not seen as worth more than actually what the mainstream kind of is putting on us. That's it for this game. I don't know what's going on. So this is the current working title is Ocean Remembers Your Body, and so it's a text-based adventure game in which you have to type all your answers and responses. So it's also secretly an archive, and it's like my first kind of foray into creating a game just using just text, pretty much. Yeah, so the first thing that you get to choose is like your identity, and depending on what your identity is, what you'll get told and how you can navigate this space, which is the ocean, changes a lot. So what should we identify as?
Cis gay.
Nice.
Cis gay. The sea remembers your body. It shakes you violently and you lose consciousness. C. You gasp as you cough up the salt water trapped in your lungs. Your eyes sting as you squint to look around. The sky is dark with a thick fog. The peaks of the waves are illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. The water is thick and the waves heavy. Your head bobs up and down with the rhythm of the tide. You should try looking at the words of the waves. You may understand what they ahve to say. You can look at things by typing look at, subject. You can move in a direction by typing north, south, east, or west. To your north are some silent waters. To your south you notice some objects floating on the water. To your west the sea is red. You can see words of the waves here. That's not a verb I recognize.
There's this premise that I've been writing about the wounds of the sea, and about how the sea is 70% of the earth, and yet nothing that happens on it is ever recorded, because the oceans wash it away instantly. You can't really have a trace of what's happened on the surface of the sea, because nothing gets built on the surface, and anything that does happen on a boat is lost. And so I have this idea of these wounds of the sea, these huge gaps in history that we will never know what they are, and we'll never get them back, but they did happen. And the sea has traces of them by how the waves move, by maybe what's deep below the ocean, what once decayed there, what once fed the fish there. But at the same time, our access to it, we don't have any access to it at all. And so within this game, it gives you access. And depending on who you are and the choices that you make determines on what happens when you go into a wound. And so it's more of like an exploration into a lack of archiving here, and how systems that don't allow us to record can create erasure, and what needs to happen in order for that erasure to dissolve.
We talked at the beginning about the authorship of the engines and the people who then build things on top of those engines, especially from identity, from race, from class, and how they're completely separated. What is your approach to systematizing that? How much of that does the engine assist you, and how much of it have you had to forge yourself?
So for this one, I think the engine is pretty good, because the coding language, maybe I can show you the coding language. So right, on the left hand side is the coding language here. And so the bits of code I'm writing is, the ocean remembers your body is a room. What drew me to this one is that, like, I could write stuff like, gender is a value. The genders are cis, trans, and unknown. Understand cis, male, M or F, or female, or white, or English, or gay, or girl, or woman as cis. And like, this may all change later, but like, this to me is archiving something. Even within the code, it's like, even that the fact that you can read the code of this game and it says that, poetics of what the code is actually doing, and how it's segmenting people up, and how none of this is neat at all, and how it's kind of making a point. By the end of this game, you could have a print off of the code, and that is saying something one level below what the game is saying. Something I like people to do is put in work, you know? I like people to like want to look one level deeper, and I'm trying to build a system that actually rewards that.
North. Silent waves. The texture of water here is more similar to oil. You see some figures made from liquid dancing on top of the water. They are in a continuous process of loosening and regaining their shape. Swimming toward them, they notice you and dance around you. To your east appears to be turbulent waters. To your south is the sea you began at. To your west the water is fresh. You can see water people here.
Where can we find your work?
DanielleBraithwaite-Shirley.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at LadyDanGFUA.
Danielle, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I enjoyed speaking with you.